Bienvenidos a otro en vivo de Frikigamers. Ahora vamos a ver el documental interactivo de Digital Eclipse sobre el primer juego comercial de Jordan Mechner, The Making of Karateka. Ya está disponible para PC, PlayStation, Xbox y Nintendo Switch Norteamérica. La versión de Nintendo Switch de Europa y Australia llegará el 5 de septiembre y a Asia el 7 de septiembre. El documental se vende por $19.99 o su equivalente en moneda local. Espero que les guste el video. Ya ustedes saben, suscríbete, dale like y activa la campanita.
So, this is a MediaMate, and it contains a bunch of 5 1/4 inch discs. There's a lot of classics in here, including Wolfenstein and Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, which inspired us later. And just behind that is the game, Karateka. Love it. It's so good.
I remember seeing Karateka and wanting it and then not have enough money to buy it. But I think I saved up some money and I eventually went back and got it. I was sold on the box artwork alone. Kind of told a story. I remember the illustration was really well done. And again, just kind of told a story of what that game was. And yeah, eventually I picked it up and started playing it.
When I first loaded it up, what I expected was something down the lines of Karate Champ or similar head-to-head beat-em-ups. Instead, what I got was a cinematic experience. That's what blew my mind, right? The fact that it started with, a text crawl, right out of, which to my mind, that was right out of Star Wars, right? That cinematic experience is the thing that was just amazing, right? It was the most movie-like experience I'd ever had in a video game at that point.
It really felt like, you're a karate hero in a movie. That's fantastic. All the other things feel like bleeps and bloops, and this is like, movie making. It was amazing.
Yeah, I was just very impressed by the fluidity of the animation. And the kicks look great. The punches look great. They were always capped off with a little bit of a sound, a little kia. Yeah, the fluidity of the motion, I think, really set the stage for the rest of what I had consumed about that game.
The animation was cool, and that was very innovative, obviously, at the time. The process and the beginning of animation getting better and better, right? And more cinematic. Taking cues from the movie industry. But I think the story, I think the storytelling was probably one of the first. I can't think of another game at the time that had that element to it.
The characters were not little sets of pixels. They, in fact, were fully formed individuals. They had personalities. They had strengths and weaknesses. You've got to remember the level of graphics that people were doing at that time, and they were on the sophisticated side for that time.
Karateka was historically a very significant game, and it saw the future before anybody else did. Part of it was because it understood the language of cinema, that visuals mattered, that full motion mattered, that human beings and characters and characterization, and storytelling and music mattered in a way that we take for granted now when we see games. Games that are at least as complex as films.
And our common knock against a lot of game developers today is that they want to be movie makers. But, gosh, you could almost look at Karateka as sort of the original apple from the Tree of Knowledge there. It was really, in a lot of ways, the first game that put together fluidity of motion, cinematic shots, story arc, twists, filmic language, and pointed the way towards a marriage of film, movie style storytelling and gameplay.
Bárbaro, muy interesante la introducción y las diferentes opiniones de duros de la industria del videojuegos. Miren, estaba hablando John Tobias ahí de los creadores de Mortal Kombat, señores, ya ustedes saben. Vamos a seguir con este documental muy interesante.
You actually got started when you kept going to the local arcade and you kept borrowing quarters to put in the arcade machine to do, what was it? Not Star Wars.
Space Invaders?
No.
Asteroids?
Asteroids. Yeah. You were completely addicted to asteroids. Every day you couldn't wait to go to the arcade to put some more quarters in that machine to play asteroids.
And that was 1980, so by then I was already in high school. That's pretty embarrassing if I was borrowing quarters from you.
From everybody. Yeah. But I gave you the quarters, and then you decided you had to program your own asteroids. Why leave it to the arcade? And you said, I can do this on my computer. You were caricaturing when you were 9 years old.
The caricaturing, yeah.
But you did it because you wanted to use the money to buy an Apple computer.
The way I remember it, I was 12, 13 years old. I was doing the caricatures, I was doing the Cookie magazine, my Mad magazine parody. And really I wanted to do comics and animated films, but this was before computers came along. So I think if the Apple II hadn't been invented when it was, I probably would have just kept on making comics.
Okay, but I remember that you went to those street fairs, to those town fairs, to earn money to buy yourself an Apple computer.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know what the money was going to be for, but it was, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, but later on, you were definitely trying to save up the, I think you needed $900 to buy an Apple computer.
Yeah, $1,200.
$1,200.
That was the price of a 16K
So,
Apple II.
So to translate that into today's money, you can multiply maybe by 6. That's real money.
I know it was all the money I had.
Yeah.
And then even after doing the caricatures,
then you borrowed from Emily to get for the last $100. You borrowed it from Emily. So then you started programming games. So the first one was Asteroids.
Asteroids was actually, I mean, it took a couple of years to get to that point because my first games were in BASIC. You know, there was a game called Breakout on the Apple II. It had colored blocks and you have a kind of a paddle. It's very simple. It's a ball bouncing and you try to knock out the blocks.
Yes, right.
And so I would look at these programs written in BASIC and try to deconstruct how they'd been done.
Mm-hmm.
And IBM had the Thomas J. Watson Research Center Explorers program. Once a week, my friend Adrian would drive me after high school to IBM, and like they would let us kids come in and use the computers after hours. So that's where I first started learning how to program BASIC and APL.
I see.
And then with the Apple, it had BASIC, but it also had machine language, which was more of a mystery. It took longer to learn that.
Yeah, I remember that you did program Asteroids. You worked on that quite a while, and it was so good, such a good replica of Asteroids that a New Jersey company bought it from you. They paid you a lot of money.
Well, maybe, I think it was $400.
That was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money. And it was the first money that I'd earned by programming.
Yeah.
And I was keeping track of it.
It was fabulous. And you had a royalty position, and you thought you would make a lot more money from the royalty. But then they got sued, and they had to stop the whole thing because it was too good a replica of Asteroids.
Yeah, that's right. That's almost exactly how it happened. The best-selling Apple game at that time was Space Invaders, and they sold, I don't know how many, but I figured out that if I could do that for Asteroids, that would be my ticket.
Yeah, and you were right. I mean, if they hadn't gotten sued, you would have.
If that'd been a year earlier, right, that was just about the time that Atari kind of figured out what was going on, and they sent threatening letters to all of the new game publishers saying you can't publish copies of our games, and the Asteroids never got
that
published.
was a big letdown.
Jordan was from a different world when I met him.
I don't think I ever heard a single college-related story from him. He was in a different world. I think college was just a place he lived. At least that's the impression that he gave.
What did you think about me making games? The fact that I was in college, but I was taking my computer with me and spending most of my time on these games.
You know, I always encouraged everything you wanted to do. I was indiscriminate.
That's true. I don't remember you ever trying to discourage me or telling me that I should focus on my studies.
In our family, that's what works best. People follow their passions, and that usually leads to a good result.
And so Jordan was this really, like his father played Go, his father played chess, just a very intellectual background, and yet Jordan was so into pop culture. Jordan loved all of the movies that had come out, Star Wars and Indiana Jones and all of those other movies, and also classics of cinema. So he was well-versed in all of it. So he's this intellectual, like consummate intellectual, but is super into pop art forms as well. And I think Jordan managed to sort of gain control of his life, and everything else sort of fell away from that. His studies and everything, he started forgetting about.
I mean, I was getting pretty bad grades my freshman year. I was struggling. I had to drop a bunch of classes because I was spending all my time programming games. Did you even know that?
That didn't worry me because I knew that was common among high achievers.
Same thing with Bill Gates, although I think Bill's departure from Harvard was involuntary. But a lot of these guys, they're just in too much of a hurry to get on with it and didn't want to spend any more time wasting their time.
did another one which was called Death Bounce, right?
Yeah, amazing. I'm amazed you can remember that. Yes, it was Death Bounce.
Death Bounce, yeah.
And it was kind of like asteroids, but just different enough to be original. Instead of the asteroids, it was bouncing colored balls, like pool balls, that ricocheted off the sides of the screen.
So what happened to that?
Well, that was the first game that I sent to Broderbund.
Oh, yeah.
And I was in college. I was in my dorm room freshman year when the phone rang, and it was Doug Carlston, the president of Broderbund, saying, "Thanks for sending," that sent the game on a floppy disk, in the mail. That's how he did it then.
He was in college, and by his own admission, spending a lot more time learning to program than studying sociology or whatever it was he was majoring in down at Yale. He sent, I think his very first submission was something called Death Bounce. And I actually thought he was a pretty good coder, especially for somebody who obviously wasn't doing it full time. Although it turned out he was doing it a lot more full time than I realized.
And he said, it's well programmed, you're a good programmer, but this game is just a little bit old fashioned.
There was no plot, there was no story, there was nobody you cared about, there were just balls bouncing around doing different things. And although you could get away with that, I just thought it would be a much better product, not that particular one, but if he would try to come up with a storyline, a backstory for what he was doing. I did try to make it as much a not rejection as I could by telling him that I thought he was a keeper and he just needed to work on something that was a little bit different.
I got that phone call and he said, "I'm going to send you our new game, which is a big hit, called Choplifter, so you can see what this year's games look like."
That was Danny Gorlin, and it was a straight submission. And initially there wasn't a game. He just was really interested in what it would take to make a joystick fly a helicopter on the screen. And then he added a little rescue thing, and we eventually, with him, turned it into a game.
And Choplifter was, you controlled a helicopter, and the idea was to rescue hostages.
Oh, yeah.
It was kind of based on the Iran hostage crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to fly your helicopter and rescue these little, 8-pixel high characters who are running around in the desert. It's a very simple game by today's standards, but what struck me about it was that it told a story.
That inspired you to think about Karateka?
Yeah, because when I saw Choplifter, it's like the state of the art of games had advanced. And that was kind of a revelation to me, because I realized that all the games that I'd been trying to make, Asteroids and Death Bounce, were really inspired by those coin-op arcade games, where you had 3 lives and you tried to rack up as many points as you could. But then with the home computers, games were sold on floppy disks, so you actually owned the game. So when I saw Choplifter, I realized that there's no need to make those kind of games, where people are going to keep playing to try to get a high score. Mm-hmm. A game can actually have an end.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of Choplifter, it doesn't say game over.
Yeah.
Put your quarter in, it says the end. And so that was new at the time, so that sort of was part of the inspiration for Karateka, to do a game that would also tell a story.
Bueno, mi gente, aquí lo dejamos con el primer capítulo. Vamos con el segundo capítulo en otro video. Ya ustedes saben, suscríbete, dale like y activa la campanita.